Good morning, and welcome to Redeemer Lutheran Church. I'm Pastor Gary Lodeholt. Edgar Allan Poe is one of the most celebrated of early American authors, often credited with creating the detective story. However, many of his stories seem dark and haunting, and one of the frequent images he uses is that of a bird. You might think of his poem, The Raven, and how the bird says, "Nevermore." There's just something disturbing about it. In addition, you can think about Hitchcock's movie, The Birds, and you know that birds aren't always images of hope and light. As we continue this week to look at stories from the Bible that feature birds, today's two passages are a bit like that. A little eerie, a little unsettling, a little dark. Our first passage comes from the 23rd chapter of Matthew, and it's interesting in several ways. We read, "O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to it. How often I would have gathered your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, and you would not." When Jesus said this, he was coming down the Mount of Olives and looking across the Kidron Valley right at the temple. It is here that Jesus weeps over Jerusalem. In fact, there's a church in that spot today called Dominus Flevit, which means the tears of Jesus. Most think that Jesus was expressing deep sorrow over God's continual outreach and unconditional love, which was so often rejected by the people. Unless we think Jesus' tears applied only to them, they apply to us too. But this passage has other, more comforting things to offer us as well. It's a beautiful image to think of God gathering us under wings of protection and love. It's a moving thing to think of God's heart yearning for us so. This is a powerful image in the Bible. There's one more thing we might see here. This is one of the places where we find a feminine image used for God. God is likened to a hen, not a rooster. And from this we learn that God has both masculine and feminine characteristics. Both male and female belong to God and are like God. God exhibits characteristics of both, and perhaps that helps us feel even closer to God. Our other passage for today involves birds, but I kind of doubt you would think about it if I asked you to think about passages that involve birds. I think this story won't need introduction once you hear it. In Matthew 26 we read, Jesus said to him, "Truly I tell you, this night before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times." Of course, this is about Peter's denial of Jesus, and the bird involved is a rooster. It's a sad story, ending with Peter realizing what he had done and going out and weeping bitterly. When we read the story, we are forced to think about the many ways and times that we deny Jesus too. But there's something more here, a glimmer of the dawn of salvation. That's what roosters do, you know. They cry out about the dawn. I have a neighbor who has some roosters, and every morning my dogs look at me with a disgusted look at how that rooster interrupted their sleep. And if my dogs could talk, I believe they would say some words that preacher dogs aren't allowed to use about it. But roosters cry out to announce the dawn. Our Advent wreath here at Redeemer is a brass fixture, and there are images carved around on the outside, and one of those on our wreath is a rooster. As we anticipate the coming of the Christ child, the rooster is the symbol announcing his birth, the dawning of our salvation. Just so, perhaps we should think about this rooster crying out at Peter's denial in a similar way. Jesus' work of suffering and dying for us has begun, and perhaps the first herald of the light of God's salvation for us is this rooster. As Jesus saves us, this rooster calls us to pay attention. God's light is dawning. Thanks for watching, and remember to let this day belong to God.